Good morning, everyone. Sunday morning. I'm still waking up. This is the wrap-up video for Garcia-Canclini's essay. I want to go over a few things about the essay, and I'd like to link the essay to the paper assignment of the film that we're going to be seeing for this unit. Really loved how you addressed the shortcomings of all those definitions of the city. I thought was very astute of you that you noticed that the notion of life experience for him is very important. Let's not forget he's an anthropologist. So for him, life and social connection and social discourse are really essential things. And so I completely agree with what you said in the discussion that we need to take things from all the different definitions, and we can't focus on just one, because then we miss the overall picture of what the city is or might be. But the idea of life experience for him is something that takes a little bit more precedence. He's not discounting economics. He's not discounting the sort of geographic notion of the city, but the idea of life experience for him is essential, which is why the large study on people traveling through the city in the second part of the essay. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind, especially for what we're going to see, for the film that we're going to see. There was, I thought, a little bit of confusion about the quote that I gave you to work with. And it was about one specific word, the word imagined, kept being used sometimes as false or fiction. And he doesn't mean it as imaginary, as not real. He means it as imagined, meaning that these are images that we actually have in our minds when we interact with the city. And I love how you brought in Sex and the City, because the clip that we saw is very much about the image that we have of the city, and then sort of the reality of the city itself, with a splash of water all over her and all of that. And so don't think of imagined, I don't have the quote with me, I'm sorry. Don't think of imagined as false. Think of imagined as an image. Imagine as in it's creating an image of the city. And I think that's a more accurate way of thinking about it. Yes, these images are not necessarily true, but they're also not necessarily false, because in a way they're very real. We do have these images that come to our mind when we think of certain cities, when we think of certain aspects of certain cities. The last thing that I want to talk about, the essay that you really, you did that really beautifully, was this notion about how different experiences view the city differently. And this is basically what the study is about in the second part of the essay, and it's something that you address really quite well. If we take the city of Chicago, a commuter looks at a city differently from a resident, somebody who lives actually in the city, and it depends where you live in the city. Do you live in 75th and State, or do you live in Lincoln Park, or do you live on Pulaski Road, right by 9094? Those are four different experiences in the way that we see the city, the way a policeman looks at the city, like we saw in the study, the way a tourist looks at the city. These are all real images, these are all real perspectives, but they differ in the same space. And that's what he means when he talks about how important it is to study life experience, because we don't all see the same thing. One of you talked about historical context, like why is it that certain ethnicities are in certain areas? Why do we have this notion that you really said really well a few units ago? Take the Red Line, and you know exactly where the whiter section of town or the more African-American section of town is. And so keep that in mind, because that's a really important notion in there as he thinks of life experience. At the beginning of the unit, I talked about this word periphery, about the sort of the margins of the city. And if you notice, most of the films that we have been seeing are in the center of town. They're sort of like where things are happening. The film that we're about to see, it's very much in the periphery, very much in the margins of the city. We do enter the center of the city for a few minutes in the film, but for the most part, we're always on the outside. I don't want you to forget that as you write your papers, because I think this is a really, really important part. The other thing is that the study that Garcia-Canclini did about all these people viewing the city as they travel, I think that section is going to be quite important for the film. And some of you didn't really talk about that part in your posts. So I'd like you to go back to the essay and maybe go back to the discussion, because other people did talk about this, because I think it's going to be quite useful for what you're going to be doing in the paper. So make sure you do that before you go to write the paper about Los Olvidados. As I said in the unit, I find it a hard movie to watch. It's just, it just breaks my heart every time I see it. It's really quite wonderful. We are finishing this class, guys. We have 2 more discussions, and then we have the final. Haven't decided if I'm doing a video or an email telling you about the final exams, because there are parts of it. But I should be sending that today or tomorrow. Okay? You know where I am if you need me. Send me an email. I usually respond pretty quickly. Have a wonderful Sunday. Bye.